Good evening, everyone. We'll begin with the Yannick Volunteer Fire Department. Chief, the microphone is yours. John, any preliminary comments?
It's on page 82, by the way.
The antique is on
90.
91.
9091, John.
Oh, right. I read my old notes. I don't listen to myself. 91 is where the budget is located. There's not too much difference in the request versus proposed. A few items were adjusted upward in this case, which is rare. But one of them was utilities, and that was the key item that we adjusted by $14,000. And in the capital is monies to convert the system to gas. Now we have that opportunity now to utilize gas in Yantic because the gas line went in for the Hale Mill. And since they've had oil tanks floating away a few times, it behooves us to probably go to gas because it's a little more cost effective. And that's all I have at this point.
Yeah, the gas line has already been tapped into, and under Chief Blanchard, the gas line was run underneath the parking lot, I'll call it the north end of the firehouse, prior to that being repaved a few years ago. So that just kind of sat there dormant, and then they tapped in with the idea that the gas line was going to happen sooner or later to the mill. And then the one thing that will happen, we've had utilities come and take a look at the system and assist us. We will be converting to gas, but the savings, where the savings would really come into play is if we converted the entire firehouse over to the heating system, and this outlandish message, way hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to convert that firehouse over. We then looked at like wall pack units for heating. If we were to do that, the electrical system will support transferring the entire firehouse over to wall pack for heating. And again, it's, if we had transformers someplace and had numbers of $500,000 to $600,000 just to upgrade the electrical and make it we're at that point where the conversion to gas would be much better, cleaner, but we're not sure we're going to see a whole lot of savings with the gas conversion.
Members?
The tank is 20 years old, 22 years old, so the tank should have gone 5 years ago.
Members, questions?
And I did ask that the fire hose and the David Clark headsets get put back in the capital. I believe that Josh should take care of that for us. But
He did.
good, thank you.
Members? Alderman Singh.
How are you?
Good morning.
Good evening. Yeah.
I say good morning all.
It's all good. So you still have those underground utility tanks, like the oil tanks, fuel oil tanks?
Yeah, they were put in, the first time it was 22 years ago.
But they are okay though, right now?
They're no leaking, nothing in the interstitial space. However, they have a 20-year lifespan.
Okay, so it has passed the lifespan?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Members? Pro Temp, please.
Thank you. Hello again, Chief. Thank you for being here tonight. I've been asking every department head the same question. If we held your budget increase to 2.5%, that would be well, I can do the math in my head, it would be about $17,500 less than what's being proposed in this budget. What impacts would that reduction of that amount of money have? I mean, how would you cover that if you had to?
Well, that is, as I kind of look at things here now.
Yes.
Said to ask him to speak in.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me, Chief, could you bring the microphone closer? People that may be viewing cannot hear.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Much better.
Yeah, I'd have to play devil advocate and look at each line and maybe take a little out of each line, but that would be, I can see it being kind of difficult. Equipment, furniture, and maintenance would be a concern, again, with a firehouse that's over 115 years old. We are having things starting to play catch up with us. So that would be a difficult one. Hate to say it, but if it happened, it happened, and we'd make it work. We'd figure it out.
Yeah, well, right, well, you always do, but I guess what I'm looking for is I'm not, I don't know, how do I want to rephrase this? I'd like you to tell us what the negative impacts would be, so that when we talk to folks and say, well, if we make these cuts, this is what it's going to mean.
Sure, and so I can't adjust, we can't really, just going line by line, can't really adjust physicals. Those are part of an OSHA mandate, and those numbers unfortunately end up being what they are. Right? You have to have physicals with folks. Professional development, and have to have training for those folks as well. Unfortunately, even going to some of the state schools, the tuition at the state schools is going up. Firefighter one was $1,200, I believe it's going up to around $1,500 now. And again, that's entry-level firefighting. So a lot of those courses that we have, a lot of the vendors we bring in, obviously have a price tag when we start to talk about training. As far as equipment, furniture maintenance, and building repair maintenance, again, we're just dealing with an older station, and with X amount of air packs, with X amount of flashlights, with thermal imagers, all rugged, all built, basically fire tested, but maintenance costs on those are going up. Maintenance costs on everything have gone up, and the bigger problem is waiting for supplies to show up. What used to be a 1 day, 2 day, 1 week turnover is now 4, 6, 8 week turnover, and basically people are waiting for parts. So that makes it more difficult. Do we spend a few more bucks to get something a little quicker? And so that does bring concerns. Communications, that line item's kind of a fixed, for internet and the radios and dispatch, and supplies. Again, same thing. Whether it's floor wash or floor soap, truck soap, light bulbs. It's unfortunately, as we all know, everything's going up, and it's getting tougher and tougher to procure some of those items in a timely manner.
The city manager mentioned increasing the proposed mostly because of the anticipated utility costs. Where did that number come from? Did that come from the utility? Said this is, if your usage stays here, this is pretty much what you're going to expect to pay in the next fiscal year?
I'd have to defer, but yeah, I mean, I didn't bring this year's budget, but this year's utility, here we are 9 months in, and I think I'm in the low 90s already on my utilities.
Because instead of buying oil, you're gonna be buying gas, so
Yeah.
it's just really, what line item is it coming out of, right? I mean,
Yes.
you're still gonna have to spend the money, because
Correct,
Right.
correct. And I don't have city gas, so I'm not all familiar with
Yeah.
costs or conversion rates or how much gas is used per gallon of fuel oil. I really, probably, I figure, find it out, but I can't, I couldn't give you a solid answer right now. So those utility costs are gonna be there. And the more calls we go on, the more the doors are open and people head out. And, the firehouse is at 65, 66, and all of a sudden it's down to 23 for a few minutes, and then big
Oh, right.
overruns kicks in.
I don't know that we'll have a mild winter 2 years in a
I
row.
know, yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Members? Well, want to thank you for your service. I believe it's the 176th year of service for Yannick.
Yeah,
Second oldest active in the country,
yeah, Weathersfield's a little older than us.
Weathersfield.
Yeah.
Okay. How's your membership? Where's it stand?
We're hovering around 50. We're doing okay.
Okay.
Our responses are timely, and we're doing okay.
Okay.
Always would love to see more, that's for sure.
Thank you.
Okay? Thank
Yep.
you.
Okay, next will be EGP, can you go now? EGP is on page 82. '82, '83 are the numbers. Basically, in EGP, most of the line items requested were granted. There were a few that were trimmed down slightly, uniforms and clothing and vehicle fuel, based on our projections. Other than that, the budget is pretty straightforward. They also have a few capital items in the capital budget. I'll turn back over to the Chief Milton.
Good evening, everyone. Looking through the budget a couple of weeks ago and communicating with the city manager and Josh, we're all very happy with it. We will definitely make it one way or the other, like as you said, as we always do. So I'll entertain any questions if anybody has any.
Members? Any questions? Pro Tem.
So Chief, you can ask the same question of everybody. Right?
Sure.
And it's all departments, it's not just not just the public safety stuff. So if you were held to a 2.5% increase over last year, that would put you at just a little over $169,000. That would be a $4,700 cut. What kind of impacts would that have on the line items in your budget?
Again, kind of reiterate what Chief Iber said, as you all know, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, the cost of everything has gone up. Excuse me. The constant firefighting equipment testing of ground ladders, SCBA flow testing, the hose testing, all that stuff is climbing, including the training EMT classes, Fire 1, Fire 2. So it's going to play a little bit of an impact. I'm not going to say it's going to be a detrimental one, that's for sure. But it'll play some type of impact, I'm sure, somewhere along the way. And of course, as usual, like anything, you always have that unexpected bill. Like it was this past year or the year before, we had a hot water heater go out in the middle of middle of the year. So there was an unexpected cost that we never thought about. So it's going to, I'm sure, it'll have some type of an impact. How severe, I really don't know right now. I don't think it's going to, like I said, I know it's not going to be detrimental, that's for sure. And again, I don't want to be, like Chief Iver said, the physicals are mainstream, that's very important. Yeah, it's just more or less, I went because the price increase of everything, of equipment and such, and supplies.
Thank you for that. I've noticed that your proposed budget doesn't include a, $16,000 increase in your utility costs, like we just heard about.
Well, like I said, unfortunately, I don't control the utilities. That comes out of the finance office. So I let them set that. If I think there's a concern, obviously, I reach out to John and Josh about that, when we get the emails and such like that. I haven't really noticed too much of a significant issue in it. My significant issue for mine right now, even right now as we speak in the current budget, is my fuel cost. I just have, I have a fuel tank at my station or whatever. Again, with the rise of fuel, obviously it has come down since a couple of months ago, as I'm sure you're all well aware, if you have the diesel vehicles or such. That just basically kind of comes out of their office, and I look at it, I don't look at it every month like I probably should, but I do look at it to see where I stand, and if I do have questions, concerns, I guess I do reach out to the city manager or Josh and ask.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, you're welcome. Other members, Alderman Singh.
Thank you. Thank you. Just a quick question, just to get a little more understanding about this renovate staircase and upstairs project. I know it was not funded, but it was requested. But if you can elaborate a little bit about that.
That's the staircase in the firehouse that leads up to our second floor. It does have asbestos in it. And what I'm referring to is, we have the treads on the stairs, so there's glue in that, and there's actually glue in the popcorn ceiling. So we're looking to hopefully renovate it and get that all out of the station. We did a renovation project up in our hall that had the same type of stuff on the popcorn ceiling, and a couple other locations on some of the older linoleum on the floors had asbestos in the glue. So we're just looking to update that and kind of abate all that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir. Other members? Thank you, Chief.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Yes, the next department will be Laurel Hill. Page 84. Again, there were slight adjustments made to this budget in a few of the line items. Equipment and furniture maintenance, and a little bit in 1,500 in uniforms and clothing. Another 1,000 in vehicle fuel. We made some adjustments to those. And license and subscriptions. So all in total, it was about an $8,000 reduction. Laurel Hill also has some capital items in their budget. And I'll turn it back over to the chief.
Good evening, everyone. So after reviewing the budget, pretty much where I expected it to be. I don't have any significant problems that would need to be addressed with John or anyone else at this moment. Obviously, everything's kind of unforeseen going forward. At this time, I'll take some questions from you guys if you have any.
Members? Alderwoman Gould?
Good evening, Chief. Thank you for being here. Where does your membership stand at this time?
Currently, I believe we have 43. We just had someone come in last month, which I believe puts us up to 43.
And you have 97% of those members are state certified,
In something, yes.
according to this.
Yes, in something. Between EMR, EMT, forestry, Fire One, some type of state certification.
And I was going to ask you something else, and it's just gone out of my head, so I'll see if it comes back to me.
Fair enough.
If I may, I did want to note that Laurel Hill coordinates the CERT team for us. does a very good job on that. We call upon CERT in a number of emergencies and sometimes crowd control, things like that. And the CERT team comes out of Laurel Hill.
Members, questions? Pro Tem.
Hi, Chief. Thank you for being here tonight. Same question I asked the first two chiefs. At 2.5%, your budget would be 88,757. That's a little over $3,600 less than what is proposed. What impacts would that have on your overall operational budget?
I mean, $3,600 overall, we could make that work. It would just be a matter of what types of things would most likely be tested throughout the year, as long as everything stays in operation. Obviously, we have testing of our SCBA's, like Chief Milton said, SCBA's, ladders, hose. Those things have gone up considerably over the years. So if our budget gets reduced, it's a matter of things that have to get done, and then things that break might have to wait. Chainsaws might have to wait until the next budget year to get fixed, or hose, because if we recouple it, might have to wait until next year to get fixed if we don't have the money for it.
I also noticed that your in your budget, your utility costs are not indicating any sharp increase like we saw a little earlier. I don't want to belabor the point, but that number comes from finance department? That's
Correct.
okay.
And it's been pretty consistent since some of our energy efficiency upgrades that were put through the city council. We started that project about 7 years ago with a on-demand boiler, supplies the entire firehouse. We also got new air conditioning units, energy efficient lights, new windows. That has kind of kept that budget pretty steady over the last 3 or 4 years. Right around $10,000 to $12,000 is where it's kind of been, depending on how bad of a winter we have, which this year was pretty mild, so we're probably going to come right around that 10,000 mark.
But just so I understand what Chief Milton said, so whatever algorithm's being used to figure out what that number is, that's happening in a finance department. That's,
Correct.
You're not all individually doing that math.
No.
Okay, all right.
No, that comes directly, so the budgets go directly to finance. They just have our individual
Yeah.
names on them, and then they get paid. And then Josh comes out with I believe last time I talked to him, it was like a 3-year average. And that's how he finds that number. And inflation, he puts it up a little bit.
Yeah, okay. So, so I'll follow up with them instead of asking you more
3
questions.
years, 5-year
Yeah.
average is what he's kind of been going
Okay.
through since I've taken over chief 14 years ago. It's always been some type of average over the years.
Yeah.
And then he throws inflation in there as well. But you have to come up with that exact algorithm from him.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other members' questions? Alderman Singh.
Thank you. Just a quick question on my own knowledge sake. It says replace hose tender number 6. So how old is the existing hose on that truck, I believe?
The hose or the truck?
Hose tender.
So the truck itself, how old is the
Truck
truck?
itself.
The truck is 38 years old, I believe, currently.
Okay.
Most trucks are designed for 20 years.
Oh, okay.
So we've gotten an additional 18 years out of it.
Out of it. Okay. Thank you.
If you're asking about the hose that's
yeah.
on the truck,
Because that get replaced.
that has been replaced throughout the years through the budgetary process.
Okay.
So as hose fails, we get more hose for it. The last time we got hose for it was about 5 years ago. We went out and got about 1,000 feet of 5-inch hose that goes on it to keep it up to the 3,000 mark. Where
So
currently-
hose itself is in a okay condition, but we are
Currently,
talking
the
about.
hose itself, yes, the hose itself is in okay condition.
Okay, I thought that $500,000 for the hose is a big number.
That's
Yeah.
not for the hose.
Not for the
Actually, that has
hose.
nothing to do with the hose, that is just the truck.
Just the whole truck itself?
Just the truck.
Number 6,
Yep.
okay.
The hose would come off the old one and go on the new one without ever buying more.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other members? Alderwoman Gould?
Since the city manager brought it up for the edification of the other members of the council, could you explain what CERT is
So
and why
CERT
it's
is
important to
a-
Laurel Hill?
I'm sorry?
And why it's important to Laurel Hill?
So
In the
the CERT is a community emergency response team. It was set up back in the 80s in Los Angeles after a pile of earthquakes. It is basically used for times of natural disaster where we deplete our firefighters, police, and EMTs. They step in and help out with basic first aid, traffic control, light search and rescue, buildings that have been deemed safe for us to go into. And we stepped in unfortunately, when Gene Arders passed away. Back then, Chief Scan was the chief. He took over as emergency management and asked us to step in. At the time, there were no members for CERT. We brought in about 12 members, and then I had a pile of my members also take part in it. We had about 18, 19 people take part in the training. As of 2 weeks ago, myself, my deputy, and my past assistant chief went and became trainers for it. So we're going to have another class coming up soon to hopefully get more people involved. We would like somewhere in the 20 to 30 range of just CERT members, not including my guys. They're just on top of. But we have to start somewhere. So we now have trainers. We can do our own classes whenever we want. We've never been able to do that before in the city. We've always had to rely on state or federal assistance for that. We're going to now be able to do it ourselves. So we're looking forward to that. The training is 20 hours. We do it ourselves, and we'll get through it, hopefully get some more people to it. And it's basically there just to help when we don't have enough people, firefighters, they can step in and help us. Sheltering is another thing we do quite a bit of. So anytime we need that, we can help out with that as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Other questions, members? One, thank you for your service, but also the uniqueness of the hose tender. It's the only one in the city, I believe.
Correct.
And so it's a universal piece, actually, in that respect. Not the entire city, of course, does not have sewers, hydrants.
Yeah.
We don't have hydrants. Some of the hydrants we have are undersized. And so the hose tender serves as a universal. When needed, it can be called upon by any of the departments.
Correct. And it was originally purchased for an area up on Scotland Road that didn't have any water source at all.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next department is Taftville, no, I'm sorry, Ockham, page 87. Occam's request was basically kept the same except for some fine tuning, again, in vehicle fuel and equipment maintenance. Other than that, it remained pretty constant. Occam also has some items in the capital budget. And I'll turn it back over to the chief.
Good evening. So, yep, as the city manager said, our budget takes care of those items that they fine-tuned. I'll head it off. I know you asked about the capping of 2.5% increase. So for us, items that were not in capital that I would have to just kind of figure out, obviously we would make do just like everybody else. Items that I'm looking at that are going to be coming up that would be factored in would be replacement of some hose, because I know some of the stuff is old and will be failing this year, a replacement of an AD, and then our bathroom renovation. And then obviously the rest of the budget stuff we would prioritize based off of training, equipment, things like that.
Members? Yes, Alderwoman Brito, please.
Good evening, Chief. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Not too bad. You'll have to pardon, I'm very stuffy.
No worries.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I noticed in your 2022-23 projected, where it says percentage of women and minorities, you had 45%. And then for 2023-24 proposed, you went down to 25%. What happened?
Correct. We did have a few other females that were in the department, and due to other obligations, moving out of the area, things like that, that's where our number decreased.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Other members? President Pro Tem, please.
Hi, Chief. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Okay, so the 2.5% question, for you, that would be an impact of about $7,500.
Correct.
What impact would that have on your individual budget line items? Where would you find that money if you had to, and what would the impact of that be?
For us, the money would have to obviously bounce between equipment, furniture maintenance, and building repairs and maintenance, depending on the items, like the hose that I had mentioned. That would fall under equipment, same with the AED, and, the bathroom renovation that I factored into the building repairs and maintenance would have to move over to there to help replace that stuff, then that's what I would do. Because bathroom's still in decent shape, but just like Chief Milton said, there's asbestos abatement stuff that would have to go in there. And if it's small, that could be pricey, so that would be an item that I would just leave off for now, because it's not important, like top important for this year if need be. So that's where I would take the money for that.
I'm going to skip the question about the utilities, because I think we're pretty clear that the answer I might be looking for is going to come from Josh's and Orla's desk instead of yours, right?
Right.
Fair enough.
And I can actually give you a quick number too. Looking at my budget this year, because it does come from finance. Right now I've expended, out of 14,000 originally appropriated, I've expended 14,700, and there is a negative balance of 4,600 as of this month. So that number will go up, and even the projected for next year, 18,000, that's probably going to go in the hole as well. But yeah, that all comes from finance.
Well, thank you for that, because you're experiencing what everybody else is experiencing, which is,
Correct.
My oil this year was several $1,000s more than I anticipated. I'm sure same story for everybody, no different for you. Are you connected to gas?
The firehouse is connected to gas, yes.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Other members? Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Congratulations on the birth of your son.
Thank you.
The next budget is tap fill, page 89.
It's not here.
Not here.
He's at a fire, I believe, in Jewish City. They have no fire.
Okay.
Okay, then, for now, then, we can move on to Norwich Fire Emergency Management. That's page 76. Yeah, so it starts, the numbers start on 76. In this budget, we did some fine tuning. The big one that we reduced was the fuel request, which was about $15,000. Other than that, there was some trimming of the professional development, which was about $11,000. And some trimming of the regular employees, payroll, and that pretty much, actually that pretty much completes the revisions. And there are also capital items in the Norwich Fire Department budget. And I'll turn it back over to the chief.
Good evening. So the cuts that the city manager referenced to fuel, I'll just go in no particular order, but some of my concerns. The amount allocated is actually less than our actual amount from 21-22. And so that raises a flag for me that if we go back 2 years, we're getting less this year than what we actually used 2 years ago. And we all know that costs have gone up, so that's a concern. The professional development / training fund is, again, a typical item that gets cut. With the amount of turnover and promotions, we have mandated classes for our new officers. We have fire academy expenses for our new hires. So that's a concern. It is higher than what we had projected for last year, so we'll work within it. But again, that cut raises a few flags for me. The other one, which isn't even a cut, but I'm going to mention it because all of the departments, not just myself, are dealing with it, is the line item for physicals. So the city did an RFI last cycle, and we went with Physicians One, who turned that contract over to Concentra. And I won't speak for them, but I'll make an assumption that they're in the same boat as I am, and that they all incurred additional costs higher than what we expected. So that's just, again, it's not an item that got cut, but I just mentioned it. And let me backtrack to what I wanted to say first sitting down here. Chief Westervelt really undersold himself in the CERT. The CERT is an incredible resource. It is recognized regionally, not just in Region 4, in our region, but other regions as well, as one of the strongest CERT examples, and it's used frequently across the board from deans. So, you know, he didn't really sell himself the way he should have done. I thank that Alderman Gould for questioning him on it. But it's not just natural disasters. They were instrumental in our traffic control during COVID dispensaries in the parking lot off of Stonington Road. They do a lot for the community, and they are recognized regionally. So I just wanted to throw that out to him. Back to the topic at hand. On the capital side, the cuts. I expected some cuts to. I guess everything's palatable. The 3 vehicles probably the hardest to swallow. Squad A. You guys hear me say it all the time at public safety meetings. Every budget year for my 4 years, I think probably 3 or 4 years with Chief Scand, and still here we are seeing it cut from the line item. It's a 22-year-old apparatus with what I believe John Raymond from Fleet Maintenance described as 300,000 miles equivalency based on the hours on the engine. We did do an engine overhaul last year to extend its service life with the anticipation of it becoming a spare piece, not remaining a frontline piece. It's the busiest apparatus in the city. It averages over 1,000 calls per year, and here it is cut from the line item again from capital. So. The other 2 vehicles that were cut were my vehicle. My vehicle is a 2012 with 130,000 miles on it. It's a hybrid, a little bit gun shy with a 12-year-old hybrid, but we've been lucky. I've replaced some batteries and done some minor maintenance this year. But again, with that mileage and that age on it, it's time to replace it, but that was cut. And then the other 3rd vehicle that was cut was the fire marshal vehicle. So, you know, as you're all aware, we had a 4th fire marshal, 4th inspector added to the office with ARPA funds. The ARPA funds run out in the middle of this budget year, 23-24. The balance of that salary was funded for that position, and you know the fire marshals are on call on a rotating basis, but even those that are off duty are frequently called in for larger fires or for fires with a fatality or something that requires a 2nd or even a 3rd inspector on that scene. So that's a cut. You know, again, work around it. We always do, but I just wanted to mention that. The other cuts from capital, the kitchen cabinets. It's a 28-year-old station, and we repaired them and patched them, and we modified them, but they just need replacement. We'll live with it. But those were cut also. The lighting for Marine 2 and some PPE equipment that was cut, again, we'll work around that, so we'll deal with that. So pending any questions, those are my comments on the cuts that were made to the proposed budget.
Members, questions? Pro Tem?
Hi, Chief.
Good evening.
Good to see you again. So same question I've been asking everybody, but for you, obviously, scaled impact, right? But if we held the increase over your projected for this fiscal year, it would mean 117, just a little over $117,000 difference in what's proposed here versus that number. Talk to us about the impacts of trying to find $117,000 in your budget.
That's a big number, and my first question would be, is that all-inclusive across the board of capital, general fund, and CCD? Or?
No, exclusive of capital. It's just on the operational side.
Okay. 117 is a big hit when you look at the individual line items, and I will use our biggest line item, other than staffing, of course, is usually equipment and furniture maintenance. So that is at 124. That's our largest line item. That's usually the one that gets hit because it has the deepest pockets, if you will. This past year, we had to use that to cover the city's portion of the grant, our AFG grant, that we received for training, for RIT, pump operator and aerial training. So that took don't quote me on this one, I want to say $37,000 hit right off the bat at the beginning of this past year. So that would take a cut. I will say that because of the cuts that we had last year, we put some projects off, and if we had to put them off again, we would, but we would just have to prioritize. We have windows that need replacement. We have a leaking roof in the Greenville station that we did a kind of a stopgap fix on over the winter, but now that it's spring and we have nicer weather, we're going to get the roofing company out there to look at it for us. Really, the only ones that I have control over are supplies and equipment. Utilities, fuel spends are going to be what they are. I can't tell the trucks not to drive easy to calls and save fuel, because it's not going to make a difference anyway. But the equipment, furniture maintenance would bear the brunt of that. Again, its total is 124, so obviously I can't take the full 117 out of that. Looking across the board, professional development, I've already touched on that, and it was decreased, but so maybe we would postpone schools, postpone training that's required, and give it another year, or see what we could do. We got creative last year, or a little over a year ago, with our training, and we started doing sponsored training versus sanctioned training when the budget's running low. And what that basically is, if you don't recall my explaining it before, was a sponsored class was I'll pay for your tuition and any materials that you need for the class or the course, but you're on your own for your hours. And as you know, staffing is the biggest expense for training. So we would look at professional development and see what courses we could put off. Most of them are mandatory and required, so there wouldn't be a big hit there, but we could help. We don't have any major repair and maintenance items. We took care of the parking lot a couple years ago, so I couldn't really cut a lot there, but I would try. And again, just like the chiefs that spoke before me, it's what firefighters do. We make do with what we have. So if that cut of 117 happened, we just put the best places to cut it for and hope for the best. We have an aging fleet. We have an aging building. We have aging equipment. We have different mandates. With OSHA, as you know, with PPE, they're getting hard on their 10-year lifespan of it, which my personal opinion is silliness, because you can have a second set of gear that is serviceable, inspected annually, repaired when it needs it, that could go beyond 10 years, but now they're coming down on departments across the state and fining them for gear over 10 years old. So we can't put the city in that position. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. No, again, yes, it does. Next question. Is part of your maintenance and repairs budget, I understand that, and I may not know this, never mind, I'll take may off of it. I do not know the scope of the problem, right? Nor do I plan on saying I have a solution, because I don't. But I know that there is an issue with the comms in the Greenville station, the ability to hear the calls anywhere in that building. Is that part of it? And I know that we're kind of migrating our way to a whole new radio system, but in the interim, that firehouse still has to function. And I'm not preaching down to you, you know that. Is there room in your maintenance and repair budget to address that in the short term while we wait for the long-term fix as part of the radio system to take effect?
That's a very timely question, because just the other day they missed a call because the alerting system and the radios in the station were not working, and the call was in their first two district for a full response. Thankfully, it was a minor call. It didn't turn out to be anything significant, but when the battalion chief arrived on scene, he asked dispatch where engine 2 was and had him call him on the landline. They never heard the call. It is a problem that has been, I think, probably close to a year. Intermittently, we've had radio repair out there. They can't identify the problem. Knowing that we have a new system coming online soon, we didn't have a lot of money to throw at it. We tried some temporary fixes, using portables in the station, leaving them on all the time. As you can imagine, it's not great for the portable or the battery life. So I'm well aware of it, as are all the crews that work out there. We try to cover it, but stuff happens, and again, they missed a call the other day because of it, because of the radio. And with it being such an intermittent problem that tactical communications is unable to identify the source of the problem, it's really hard to say, all right, let's throw a new amplifier in there at $1,000, or let's throw a new receiver in there at $1,000, and let's pay $4,000 on man hours alone, when we don't know if that's going to fix it. If they came to me and said, hey, we found the problem, we know how to fix it, here's your price, then I would weigh whether it's worth it or not, with the anticipation that the mobile radio installations are scheduled to start next week. We have an issue with dispatch that we're trying to clarify before that installation begins. But once that happens, we don't know if that will fix the problem in Greenville. The radio project equipment that was included for the stations did not include speakers and wiring. So we're not sure, because again, tactical couldn't identify it. We're not sure where the problem is. But we're hoping that the installation of the new hardware will resolve it. If not, it'll help us identify better of where the problem could be. So long answer to your question is, if it's a necessity, we'll find the money for it, but we're trying to be very prudent about spending money on equipment we're going to rip out in a week, 2 weeks, a month. But it's a challenging situation, because obviously life safety plays a role here. If twos is in quarters and they never hear the call go out and they're first due, there's a problem. So the crews are all aware of it. They're doing their work around with portables and scanners and other ways to make sure we don't miss things, but...
Okay, thank you. One more. At our request, you and both John Mayman came to Public Works meeting recently to discuss apparatus from the fleet maintenance side, and I know that the city manager has convened some discussions amongst the fire chiefs, and that's all going in the right direction. Could you share with us what your comments were to Public Works about the concept of replacing Squad A apparatus with a pickup truck?
Okay. Based on the McGrath study recommendations of replacing an engine out of headquarters with an EMS response vehicle, a smaller vehicle similar to what the volunteer groups run as squads, typically an extended cab pickup truck with medical, some fire equipment, some rescue equipment on it. The staffing for an engine company with the city, obviously we're fully staffed, and we have 3 on each piece, 3 engines with 3, the truck with 3, the aerial device, and then the battalion chief. So if you were to break up the crew and create an EMS response vehicle, it causes a few operational concerns for me. One is crew integrity, you're breaking up the crew. Second is if you have that EMS response vehicle responding now across the city for medical calls, across the CCV, I should say, you're potentially not providing the best medical service. And the city manager and I were in his office one day meeting on a different topic, and I had my radio on as I usually do, and we had talked about this, but Engine 2 went out for a medical call as we were having our discussion, and he stopped the conversation, and he asked me, he goes, well, based on what we were talking about, your EMS response vehicle from headquarters would be going to that. I'm like, yes, because that doesn't make any sense. I said, you're right, it doesn't. So it doesn't make sense from an operational standpoint to send a two-person EMS response vehicle from headquarters to cover medical calls when you have staffed companies in quarters that are closer and more capable, just by number of personnel. And I will say, 31 plus years ago, made me feel like an old man, when I was working at Chestnut Street, when we were running out of there, we had a rescue with 2 people on it that ran medical calls. And that truck would drive by Engine 6 with firefighters inside of it, EMT firefighters inside of it, to take a medical call on the street over. And that's just wrong. It's not the best service for the members of our community. It's not the best use of resources. So I think the use of an EMS vehicle has some merit. It certainly saves wear and tear on a $1 million apparatus. But for Norwich, for our response district and our call volume and our staffing, it doesn't sit well with me that would be the best option. And then again, back to the first point about crew integrity. If you have an EMS vehicle out on the street on a medical response and you have a full response for a fire, you've just taken 2 guys away from their fire apparatus, away from their third-person crew. We can adjust some manning and do whatever we need to. We're flexible, but it just, again, it doesn't make a logical response other than the fact that, yeah, you might save a few dollars on wear and tear on an apparatus versus buying an EMS vehicle.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Members, Alderman Singh.
Thank you. So, thank you, Chief. Quick question on, that might be a little bit on operational side. I know in budget you have one step 1 inspector and one step 2 inspector right now. And you're trying to get another step 2 inspector. And in the proposed budget, you are getting another step 2 inspector, but the step 1 inspector FTE is cutting into half. How that all works for you?
Okay, so for the steps, and it works with each position, the inspectors, the officers, the firefighters, they all have steps associated with them. With the steps, it's not me requesting a step 2 inspector. It's that one of the current step 1 inspectors over this time frame will promote to step 2.
Oh, okay.
Just by time and grade. And the step 1 that is funded at half, the other half is the ARPA funding. So
Okay.
that's why there's a half position funded. Which again, I appreciate the city manager and the city maintaining that as opposed to just dropping the position in December of next year, because it is a critical position. We look at the growth across the city and the projects that are proposed and the inspection lag that we currently have. And I don't just say we as in Norwich, because it's across the state. I hear it from my peers and colleagues, on a regular basis. The mandate for inspection is critical. And there are certain types of occupancies where you can imagine a high life risk, multifamilies, apartment buildings, things like that, that have a periodicity of inspection that is just overwhelming for inspectors and inspection offices. So adding that 4th one was huge for us. It's been asked for years. We're very fortunate that we had the ARPA money to add it. We're very fortunate that we can fund it for a half year and still maintain the position. But yeah, so that's how those steps work.
Okay.
They're all asked for it. They all start at the first step, and then as the seniority develops, they move up to the upper steps.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other members? Alderwoman Gould.
I was going to let you finish writing. Good evening, thank you for being here. What's the situation with firefighting foam throughout the city?
Great question. The fleet maintenance was starting to decommission foam systems on the apparatus that have onboard systems. They drained, I want to say, 2 of the systems, I think Taffville and maybe one other. and realized that it was a little problematic. The state had initially, when they decided to ban the use of PFAS foams, don't ask me what PFAS stands for because I'll butcher it. It's what's called a forever chemical and a carcinogen. So when the state banned it, and they set those dates, I believe it was October 2 years ago, prohibiting the use, they also had a plan for remediation of emptying the foam trailers, of emptying city apparatus, reclaiming all the pails and buckets of foam. So the reclamation of the containers was the first step. We did that as a city. We collected them all at emergency management. All the departments dropped off their foam there. We coordinated with the state. They sent their contractor, I believe it was Clean Harbors, came down, picked it all up. The next phase of that project was to empty and decontaminate apparatus onboard systems. The state did a pilot program on the other side of the state with a couple departments and realized that it was cost prohibitive and then said, sorry, you cities are all on your own. So that's why we tried to do something locally. Again, John Raymond took a couple. He drained them into buckets. We stored those buckets, waiting for pickup because they won't come pick up just a couple buckets. He decontaminated as best he could, and it wasn't enough. So they put if they removed plumbing, if they permanently capped it, if they closed it, they basically decommissioned the foam systems on board the truck. So if you can imagine a foam tank and all the hardware associated with it, it's still in place. It's just not used because of the PFAS containing foams. Where we stand now with it, the state is still trying to figure a workaround. They don't have an answer. So we still have equipment. We've removed all the portable equipment, all the foam extinguishers, all the Pro Packs that had the foam in it. And when I say we, I mean the fire service of Norwich, all of us did it. But we still have some onboard systems that are contaminated. We still have the state foam trailer at headquarters with old foam in it. Because they took one trailer, I think it was from Wilton, I'm not sure, and decontaminated it and realized it's just not working. I don't know, it's something silly like 1 part per trillion is what they're trying to clean this to, and it's just not feasible. You could do it, but it's very cost prohibitive. So where we stand currently is we still have foam on systems. We still have the ability to use the green foam, the new foam non-containing PFAS. I think all departments bought some. I think one of the new trucks, might be Yannick's, has the green foam in the tank.
I think so.
All of us have 5-gallon pails that we can use with an eductor if needed. We have some on Marine One. But yeah, it hasn't gone away, unfortunately. Fleet maintenance hasn't figured a viable solution, and the state's not helping us.
Typical, very typical. Capital budget for 1 second. Do you want carpet or cabinets?
We've been asking for carpet longer, and we have, I don't know if I should be ashamed or happy that the guys are this creative, but we have areas of carpet that are clear taped over with packing tape to keep it down. So carpet's probably a little more priority.
Okay. And just to go back to a previous question, why, if you had a squad type vehicle, why couldn't it be a 3-person squad to respond to medical calls for life safety issues?
You could maintain crew integrity with a 3-person squad, with the crew intact. You would lose I'll use the term order of arrival, capabilities. First due is fire attack, second due is water supply, third due is a backup line, things like that. You would lose that just by the equipment. And the lack of water supply line, the lack of backup hand lines, and that. Because none of the squads carry, I don't think any of them carry any amount of supply hose. They may carry basic firefighting tools, hand tools, but you're just not going to meet that need. And again, this isn't an us or them statement. It's just a different world of operations. We know when we go out, if the call came in for 175 Broadway, that Squad A is going to be first due, Engine 3 is going to be laying their supply line, Engine 2 is going to be coming in from the other direction, hitting a hydrant and bringing hose and everything they need to it. And that doesn't happen with a squad vehicle.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other members? Chief, I'd like to return to a discussion you had with our pro tem, involved Squad A. I think in your earlier testimony, you mentioned about 1,000 calls. It's been a bone of contention for some in the city. It was something picked up on by the McGrath Group. You spoke in your comments that were, I guess, mentioned to the Public Works Director, you repeated tonight at our pro tem's request. Just so that I understand it, it's your contention that if they were not in the engine, that would take them away from their ability to respond to an emergency dealing with structure fires and/or other items like that? Is that what you were referring to, or something else?
No, just with the last question, it wouldn't eliminate them from the crew response, but it would limit them in terms of capabilities, equipment-wise, and as I mentioned, water supply, secondary backup lines, and equipment like that. So they would be available. Obviously, they can drive to the scene in a pickup truck or whatever type of apparatus they're in.
Okay. Previously, that study that I just referenced talked about a different scenario. One where you would have 16 people on a shift. You'd increase Greenville to 4. And so now if you had 2 people in that response vehicle, not an engine, but a smaller vehicle, less costly to the taxpayers to do medical calls, how would you respond to a crew of that nature? 14 available and the 2 in the emergency vehicle. I'll use that term. I'm not sure what to refer to it as right now, but the other caveat obviously is, though, it wouldn't be 4 separate crews, but 3, as they had talked about.
Well, the first half of the equation is ideal. More people is better, obviously. So 16 running and a crew of 4 in Greenville. We did that for a few years under some temporary funding, and we saw the benefits of it, operationally. Greenville is, I don't want to say on an island, but they're isolated a little bit from headquarters. And to have that 4th person, when you think of a crew of 3 versus 4, that's just one more. What more can one person do? But it is huge when you're doing fire attack or medical with a patient or doing CPR or anything like that. That 4th set of hands is key. But you also, the second half of your question, your comment highlighted the issue with it and the challenge with the recommendation in the McGrath study. So we discussed this when the study came out. We discussed it during negotiations. We discussed it at the kitchen table. We discussed it a lot. So, would anyone be against having 16 on a shift and 4 in Greenville? Absolutely not. Would anybody be willing to do that at the cost of a whole platoon? Again, absolutely not. It's not there. And if you look at it, we're here tonight for budgetary reasons. If you look at that from a budgetary perspective, you're going to ask a crew to work 33% more hours. You're going to compensate them 33% more? Because if you eliminate a platoon and you run 3 platoons instead of 4, you're increasing a 42-hour work week to a 56-hour work week. And that's one of the flaws in the recommendation. Dr. McGrath had cited that it was the standard. It's not the standard. It's not the standard in New England. It's not standard in Connecticut. He talked about the Cali days and other things. If you know anyone who's ever worked a 56-hour work week on a firefighter rotating basis, it is problematic, and that's being polite about it. Providence, the city of Providence, a well-respected and established fire department on the East Coast, did this a number of years ago, not by choice of the union. They kind of mandated it, and a couple of years after they implemented it, they were settling lawsuits, restoring back to the 42-hour work week and paying a lot of money. I just don't think operationally it's feasible. I don't think financially it's feasible to ask someone, think of any union shop, sir, and ask somebody to work 33% more hours and not be compensated. You look at the workload of the firefighters and of the city department specifically with the call volume, and you're increasing risk to injury, you're increasing burnout, you're increasing mental well-being, all of those things are challenging by doing that. So, right from the beginning, when I read that recommendation in the study, I voiced my opinion on it. There are some recommendations in the study that are excellent, and there are some that are just horrible, and that is one of the horrible ones in my opinion.
Yet I think the group was looking for cost savings, which we haven't talked a lot about. And they felt that this was a manner in which it could possibly be achieved. People work 10, 14, so 24 hours, and then they're off 3 days, unless they're called in for a vacancy or someone's ill or injured. And they also talked about a reduction of force, I think up to 7 through retirement and attrition. You're basically telling us that that could not be achieved with this other schedule and that it wouldn't work. Is that your summation?
It could be achieved. Anything's achievable if you want to pay the price for it. I think you have to look at everything involved in terms of the contract negotiations that would be involved. Again, the expense. You know, none of us are going to say, yeah, I'll work 33% more of my hours and not be compensated for it. So it's not as if that aspect of it goes away. Would it be a cost savings in fringe benefits and other things because you have reduced manpower, or excuse me, reduced overall staffing? Well, yeah, that's common sense. But again, the studies are out there, and you can read about Providence if you like. You can see the examples out there. It shows an increase in injuries. It shows an increase in comp time to the city and liability to the city. It shows an increase in firefighter burnout. And to me, that's not worth it.
Prior to the current contract, which is on 1 day, off 3, what was the current makeup of the work staff? And that's going back a number of years.
Yeah, going back, it wouldn't be the current contract. It would be 3, maybe 4 contracts ago when we changed our work schedule. So I'll use myself as an example. When I started, our work schedule was 3 10-hour days, 3 days out, 3 days off, and then 3 14-hour nights, 3 days off, and we rotated between that schedule on a 12-day basis. So the pay purposes, that's a 42-hour pay week, the same as our current schedule, 24/72. So that was one of the I don't want to call it a selling point, but one of the points made that there's no increase to the city in terms of, regular employment cost or overtime cost because it's the same amount of hours worked per employee over the average basis, the annual basis. So the schedule was 3 days on, 3 off, 3 nights on, 3 off, again, a 42-hour pay week. We switched to the 24 on, 72 off, again, a 42-hour pay week. So that wasn't, it didn't incur any expense to the city. There are pros and cons to it. I was on the committee with the union when we decided, when we were exploring going to a 24/72 schedule. So I was privy to all the conversations, both for and against it. Even today, I could tell you there are pros and cons to it, but not monetary ones because it didn't cost the city anything.
Can you share what those cons were?
I think some of the cons were, well, let's start on the positive note first. Let's start on the pros. So with the old schedule, with the 3 on days, 3 off, 3 nights, you wouldn't see somebody administratively, staff-wise. You wouldn't see them for 12 days. You'd see them for the 3 days, and then they're going to be off for 9 because on their nights they come in at 1700 and you don't see them. So one of the benefits of the new schedule was for training purposes, for new policy, administrative purposes. In 4 days, I'm going to see each platoon on a day shift. So I have the opportunity, if we're rolling out new equipment, to introduce it to each platoon without having to wait, like I said, those period of 9 days off for those guys. So that's one of the benefits. You have a more concentrated, if you will, time with them, so you can take advantage of that. One of the downsides is on the day schedules, when we used to work 3 days in a row, if I was working on a project or we were doing something around the station and I didn't finish it today, I'm going to be in tomorrow. Well, if that happens now, I'm not going to be in for 3 days. So that's one of the downsides. Nothing that we haven't worked around. I think that you might see different ideas for maybe people who have a family. I was very fortunate. My children were young, and I had that 3 on, 3 off, 3 nights, 3 off, so essentially 9 days in a row. I didn't worry about childcare. I participated in events at my kid's school, and I enjoyed that schedule. Whereas now, and that was one of the things, believe it or not, that as a member of that committee, when we were exploring the 24th, so that I ran 2 years of calendar out, and I made it personal to myself. Like, how many days would I need daycare under my old schedule or under the new proposed schedule? And we looked at a lot of things like that. So it's working out. I miss some of the old schedule, but I like the benefits of the new schedule too.
Thank you. Appreciate your candor. The members? Pro Tem.
Sure, thank you. I'd just like to ask one question to follow up to the mayor's line of questioning, because he makes a good point. But I think, well, I won't orate. I'll ask a question. We've both read the study multiple times. And it seems to me on this recommendation that the McGrath Group neglected to take into account, and I say the reality, not that they were being unrealistic, but I think that they were being overly simplistic with the 24/48 schedule, because it makes two assumptions, and then I think a new reality now figures into the algorithm. The first assumption is that no one will ever take a day off for being sick or having kids sick at home or anything like that, right? There was everybody comes to work every day that they're scheduled without fail. That's unrealistic in my mind. Secondly, that no one would ever get hurt on the job and have to take even a day or two off for workers' comp, right? And in both of those cases, those shifts would have to be filled. And I think that the recommendation ignored that. The third piece, which is not their fault by any stretch of the imagination, but now we have a new reality called COVID. And even if somebody has been exposed and pops positive on one of those 15-minute tests, they're home for a couple of days at least, sometimes up to 5, and then if full-blown, right? So now that's a new reality that we have to deal with. So my question is my, because like I said, I've read through it enough times, but not saying that I'm completely 100% certain, but it just didn't seem to me that those factors were taken into account in this recommendation on changing the schedule. Is that fair?
Well, I don't think it's fair for either of us to assume what their intent was or what they had incorporated as a factor or not. But I will say that all the concerns I raised with the 56-hour work week, the wear and tear on the members, the amount of injuries, the increased workload, that is magnified when you take into what you said, the consideration of, all right, now someone's off on vacation, now someone's off sick, now someone's off on injury leave. Because their 48 hours off is no longer 48 hours off. Now it might be 24 and less. So now you're just taking that, again, that workload, and that it's not a young man's job. It's not a fun job at times. I mean, the guys were humping hose yesterday through Mohegan Park. Multiple companies out there helping. The guys were humping hose today at New Wharf. If you're downtown anywhere, or even Norwich, you probably saw the column of smoke. It's not something that you want to do 24 hours out of 62. You just can't. You can't expect that kind of workload and not have negative ramifications from it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Appreciate the Pro Tem's comments. With the 24/72 work schedule, have we seen an actual reduction in overtime or coverage pay when someone's on vacation, sick, or any other benefit is taken? Were there savings achieved as they were proposed when it was presented to the council all those years ago?
I don't know if I could speak to that. I could certainly look into it. I would say that the contractual obligations for time off, those didn't change because our work schedule didn't change. So you still earn time at the same amount. Your accrued time was earned because you were still working a 42-hour pay week, and they were still entitled to the same amount of vacation or holiday or sick days that they had. I don't know. I would have to run some analytics to see if comp increased over that. Unfortunately, it would probably be a labor-intensive project that our current reporting software doesn't do because we didn't have our current software back then. So I could run stuff probably back to 7, 8 years ago, but we made the change prior to that. I will say that sick use is sick use. I don't know that it's increased it or decreased it. I couldn't speak to that, sir.
Thank you. Perhaps Comptroller's Office can provide an assist. Appreciate it. Thank you. Other members? Thank you. John, we're doing EMS next?
We're going to page 81 for emergency management.
Before we go to emergency management tonight, I just had a couple of comments that I wanted to make regarding the general budget and some things, for consideration for the group. As I mentioned, when we talked about equipment and furniture maintenance being my largest line item and having to deduct a good portion of that for the city's portion of a grant, my request would be that, citywide, not just fire department, but citywide, that there is an account that accounts for when we're able to secure a grant for the betterment of the city and our personnel, that it doesn't bite the department that makes the effort to get that grant. Maybe there's something there. The other thing is, as I've experienced quite a few in the past year and a half, and have a number of them coming up, are retirements. And there isn't any really consideration ahead. Sometimes you can plan because someone will tell you, hey, I'm going to retire in 18 months, and sometimes they tell you, hey, I'm leaving in 2 weeks. But the retirement payout for the city is, again, I'm not just speaking on behalf of the fire department, I imagine other departments experience this as well, is an unplanned burden that we can loosely forecast. So I can tell you I expect 2 to 3 retirements over the next year, but I can't ask you right now for, all right, let's increase this line item for this amount because I expect to pay this on retirement payouts, for vacation and sick and other things. So, and the third thing I would ask you for your consideration is again, because I'm experiencing the brunt of it is apparatus replacement planning, and forecasting that and doing something, whatever it may be, a little bit every year is going to help. Somewhere down the line, it's going to help us. There's as the apparatus reduction committee has met a few times, and we've looked at the apparatus across the city. We'll do our part, but it's a heavy lift item, and I don't know that we, as a city, have planned for it in the best way. So I would ask you to put your thinking caps on and think about that as we move forward, and our obligations to the city and public safety, and plan a little better for apparatus. Thank you.
Thank you. Members?
On emergency
Pro Tem, yeah.
So, emergency management, 2.5% would mean a cut of a little over $1,900. What would that impact look like?
For emergency management, again, kind of a bare bones budget. That would be a simple equipment, furniture, and supplies issue. And we had some plans for organization of some of the equipment. We still have what we call multitude of cases of COVID supplies that the different departments have dropped off to us, and even Uncas Health. So we wanted to do some cleanup in our loft area, our storage area, and we had some ideas for shelves and some other things, and it also had plans to update the bathroom. If you've ever used the bathroom at emergency management, you would totally understand me. But those would be the items that would be cut for now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members? This probably be a question for the city manager, more so. Last year, we carried the position deputy chief, but it was never filled. It's being carried over again this year. What can you share with us at this time, that position? If you're looking for savings, and if, let's say, agreement is not reached on that position, what does that cost reflect? It might be a way of achieving the pro tem's request of bringing it to 2.5%, but I don't know what that value is. I see 83% here in the main budget and 17% allocation in the emergency management services.
Yeah, under the plan, the Director of Training and Safety would be eliminated. So it would be the difference between the Deputy Chief's salary and the Director of Training and Maintenance. So that would be where the savings would be. I've never subtracted the two, but it's probably like 12,000, something like that. It's probably about 12,000. So if we were to revert to the former budget, there might be a difference of about 12,000. I can't say too much about the deputy chief situation. We're negotiating the impact of it, and we've been at impasse on it to a large extent, although we're still talking and trying to come up with a solution. So I think it's the better way to go, and we're still pursuing it, but at some point, we're going to have to make a decision on what direction to go on it.
Thank you. I'm only speaking for myself at this moment. When the chief was away, due to his service to our country, and again, I always thank him for that, I found it was difficult with our battalion chiefs being in the same union from a discipline standpoint.
It was very difficult. That's why I don't want to do it again. If it happens, it's a very awkward spot to put them in because they're in the same union, and it's hard to supervise people that are going to grieve something when it's your same union that's going to grieve it, and you have to. They were good managers, but this was an obvious conflict that had issues with.
And again, in the event that any of our chiefs get called away, clearly you need someone in that role for discipline, as in any department. But as you point out, if they're in the same union, it's very difficult. I'm a union guy, retired Teamster. I'm not for unions, but clearly I think we'd be better served if our battalions were in their own union.
There's an ingrained conflict there. That was one of the attractive reasons to go with the deputy chief, because the deputy chief would be out of the union and be able to adjudicate things more directly, put it that way.
If necessary, yes. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
We do have one more, Chief.
Yep.
Chief, we got CCD,
What?
where the bulk of some of the expenses are.
Oh,
That's on page 121.
Nice try. Nice try.
You almost got away. Not too far, though. As you know, the general fund carries general administration and positions that have a town-wide impact, like the inspections and fire marshal, chief, deputy, battalion chiefs, et cetera. The CCD carries the, what number is that? Is that 121 is not the right number? Is it?
120.
Oh, okay, I'm in the wrong, I knew it didn't look right. It's 122, actually. Thank you. So this carries the regular employees, their overtime replacement costs and fringe benefits. And part of this is then allocated to the CCD district. I don't know if the chief has any comments on this, other than it's pretty straightforward. It's all related to wages, fringes, and replacement costs.
I don't have any comments because it's all contractual based. You know, I don't have any input into this other than saying I have X amount of firefighters at top pay, X amount of firefighters at bottom pay, X amount of officers at this level.
Thank you. Members? I'll follow the pro tem's lead, the 2.5%. Clearly, this is the lion's share of the department, the meat and the potatoes, whatever you want to call it. That's what my father would call it. Clearly, that would have a significant impact.
Yes, but again, I don't know. I can't cut contractual stuff.
Mhm.
I can't say, all right, I'm going to give you 2.5% less of your vacation days this year or anything like that. And that's what that's what the 4 line items are. They're other than
Right.
fringes and contractual.
Yep, but based on the manning, yes.
Yes, sir.
And for clarity, it's included at the $117,000 I was
Right.
asking him
I
about.
understand. Well, yes.
As a matter of fact, it's the bulk of the 107.
Okay.
Would be the bulk, right? However, the salaries, as you said, are contractual, minimum staffing, the steps, the scales, the ranks, right?
I will say that what we will do, because we are doing it, is we've limited some of the training because of the overtime costs that's incurred. We've limited some event participation because of the overtime costs incurred. So that if there had to be a cut, that's what we cut.
Yeah.
Thank you. Members, questions? Question for the city manager. Federal grants, ARP line item shows $600,000 this year.
Right. for
Next
firemen.
year, that's
And next year, that ARP money will be gone.
Gone.
So this next year, meaning next budget.
correct.
We covered this.
Beyond
year with
this
the
year.
30. Next year, the city would have to make a decision about maintaining that position or eliminating it. Like we have like a list of about 11 that we're gonna have to make some tough decisions on.
Right. Thank you. Other members? Chief, thank you so much.
Okay, that's complete.
Thank you for your service.
That completes tonight. Thank you. I'm sorry.
no.
He's here.
Tim's,
Chief Jenks just arrived.
he's behind you.
Oh. You did. Stealth. Very stealth.
I apologize for being late. Brush fire season work. Apart from Jinx this morning when he said we have to fire at 4 o'clock. He was right.
We're better off having brush fires when certain people are not on vacation, I think, so. Anyway, tab fill is on page 89, the numbers. We made some reductions in air vehicle fuel was one that was about 4,000. And some cuts in building repair and maintenance, and some smaller cuts in professional development, all to the tune of about a little less than $12,000 in reductions. In addition, tab fill has items in the capital budget. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the chief.
Thank you guys very much. I apologize for being late. Last year, as we came out of COVID, we saw an increase. So our previous year, our numbers were down as far as some of the expenditures we had, especially with professional development, as we had switched to an online training platform. It wasn't until April of last year that we started in-person training and trying to get some of the academy classes or to get the guys out. There were a lot of COVID restrictions. We did have several people that were unvaccinated that were unable to get into class. A lot of that stuff, they've since changed their minds. So that's basically where we're at. When we looked at things, we looked at moving forward. with several items, switching some of the stuff over through capital to, the electric Hearst tool, Jaws of Life. We currently have a hydraulic one. It was actually started its life as a set of cutters. We converted it to a combi tool. That unit is well over 25 years old. And some of the other things under capital that we put in for was the finish up the hood system. We did get some money this year. We're currently negotiating and soliciting bids for prices for the Ansel system for the kitchen hood system, as well as finishing upgrading the kitchen itself. The stove in there is 54 years old. Some of that stuff was in the mix, which replacing that, obviously things today are more energy efficient, use less gas, things of that nature. Other than that, I'm open to questions.
Thanks, Chief. Members? Pro Tem.
Chief, good to see you again. So I've been asking every department head that's sat down in that chair so far, the 2.5% question. If we increased your budget by 2.5%, it would be a bit of a reduction over what is proposed in the city manager's budget. For your department, it would be $1,800. Could you describe for us what the impact, the cut of $1,800 would be on your operational budget?
So it would honestly depend on where that money's coming from. If it's out of, if it comes out of professional development, the Connecticut State Firefighter Association Education Committee has set the price for firefighter ones this year at $1,300. That is the price statewide. So that would, if that had the potential for us to be able to send one less person to that. We use all of the regional schools, so whether it's Connecticut Fire Academy or the Eastern Connecticut Firefighter Training School. Some of the other ones, building and ground maintenance, it would just be the city already plowed for us. So realistically, it would probably depend on where it came from. Overall, if we took a little bit out of everything else, some things, it really wouldn't be that big of a hit. Like I said, send a guy to firefighter one now is $1,300. When I went, it was $200. EMT class is well over $1,000. So if we took, half out of professional development or half out of building and grounds, at least we're trying to balance everything to get to where we need to go.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Members, questions? Chief, automatic aid,
Yes, sir.
we're, I guess this is the 6th month of the administrative process. Can you share your perspective at this time?
So I've been a little busy at work trying to compile a list of the last 6 months. Well, I do believe it does have merit. I do believe sometimes dispatcher discretion can increase the city-wide liability. As far as, it was originally intended to go for a working fire. There was some changes made, but we had an incident where, we got all sorts of help for the smell of something burning in a house. It was an 800 square foot house. We had enough water on scene to flood it. So there was fine-tuning things that need to be done. It's a work in progress. There's talk of the citywide SOG committee restarting up again. There's been some movement with that. And as well as the apparatus replacement committee and things of that nature. That's, it's a work in progress. There's going to be ups and downs, there's going to be highs and lows, and there's going to be agreements and disagreements. But at the end of the day, it's working towards one common goal.
Thank you. Members? We're all set, Chief. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Chief.
Sorry I was late.
Well, it's not your fault that you had to go to a fire. This Thursday, not next Thursday. This Thursday, we finish up with some of the hearings, city clerk, elections, city manager, budget, mayor, human resources, finance, and treasurer. Then we have the first public hearing, and that public hearing, as you know, the public will be commenting on the city manager's budget. So you can get feedback on what the city population doesn't like or likes about the city manager's budget. Then on the 17th, we'll have a regular council meeting. May 1st, there's a lot of work. That's when you adopt the preliminary budget that evening. And then the second budget hearing, which the public will comment on the preliminary budget of the city council. And then finally, first or second week of June, depending on how the state budget goes and where we are, we would have the budget adoption. So that's where we are. We'll get through at least the hearings Thursday. So then it's more showtime for the city council and that part. So, well, thank you. That's what we have tonight.
Thank you.
Much.